Donald Trump and the UN, signs of clashing views on many issues. The Security Council chamber at the United Nations building in New York. The United States allies are trying to learn how Donald J. Trump will approach the pressing crises that are sure to come up before the Council. Credit Piotr Adlinsky for the New York Times. United Nations. In the genteel, carpeted halls of the United Nations headquarters, a 20-minute walk from Trump Tower, diplomats from the world over are holding their breath about the American president-elect. The optimists among them are expressing relief that Donald J. Trump said nothing during the campaign about dismantling the United Nations altogether, or turning its iconic tower facing the East River into condos. Those who represent the United States' closest allies are trying to learn who Mr. Trump will appoint to crucial foreign policy jobs and how he will actually approach the pressing crises that are sure to come up before the Security Council: Syria, Ukraine, North Korea, and the widening chasm between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Not least, many are trying to persuade his transition team to respect the international deals the United States has accepted under the auspices of the United Nations. It's important to reaffirm that, more than ever, we need an America that's committed to world affairs, said the ambassador from France, François Delatter, who noted, without elaborating, that he had met with members of the Trump team. Continue reading the main story. Sarah F. Cliff, a former United Nations Assistant Secretary General who is now director of the Center on International Cooperation, a research organization at New York University, said she expected a reprise of the tensions that erupted between the United States and the United Nations during the administration of President George W. Bush. John R. Bolton, who was ambassador to the United Nations under Mr. Bush, once said the United Nations would be more effective without its top 10 floors, where its senior leaders have their offices. Mr. Bolton is one of Mr. Trump's many would-be candidates for Secretary of State. But Ms. Cliff said Mr. Trump may also find the United Nations useful. He prides himself on making deals, she said. The UN is the forum where countries make deals in their own national interests, but that also does some collective good. His own comments about the United Nations are difficult to parse. At a 2005 Senate hearing about planned renovations of the United Nations headquarters, he described himself as a big fan and said that the concept of the United Nations and the fact that the United Nations is in New York is very important to me and very important to the world as far as I am concerned. As one of Manhattan's preeminent builders, he also offered to handle the renovation at half the price. In 2012, he complained on Twitter about the marble behind the Speaker's lectern at the General Assembly Hall, claiming he could build it better. Follow Donald J. Trump at @RealDonaldTrump. The cheap 12-inch square marble tiles behind Speaker at UN always bothered me. I will replace with beautiful large marble slabs if they ask me. 9:37 a.m., the 3rd of October 2012. 1302 at tweets. 1528 likes. In March, during a campaign speech at the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, he excoriated the world body as not a friend to freedom, adding, "It surely isn't a friend to Israel." Whatever his specific views, a number of statements made by Mr. Trump and his loyalists have conflicted with the values and positions of the United Nations. Here are the major examples. Climate change. Mr. Trump, who has called climate change a hoax, has suggested he would withdraw the United States from the Paris Accord, widely regarded as the most important United Nations achievement in years. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and President Obama invested a great deal of political energy in its success. Follow Donald J. Trump at @RealDonaldTrump. Any and all weather events are used by the global warming hoaxsters to justify higher taxes to save our planet. They don't believe it. $. 4:40 p.m., the 26th of January 2014, 555,555 retweets. 416,416 likes. Follow Donald J. Trump at @RealDonaldTrump. The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. 2:15 p.m., the 6th of November 2012. 104,557 retweets, 66,009 likes this past week. Speaking in Marrakesh, Morocco, at an international meeting on climate change, Mr. Ban said he had spoken by telephone with Mr. Trump and looked forward to a personal meeting about the importance of saving the planet from environmental disaster. As President of the United States, I am sure that he will understand this, he will listen, he will evaluate his campaign remarks, Mr. Ban said. Even if Mr. Trump does not withdraw the United States from the accord, he could ignore important commitments, including cuts in carbon emissions or contributions to a global fund to help poor countries deal with the damage wrought by climate change. American disregard of the accord could cause other countries to renege on their promises as well. Diplomats are trying to convince the Trump transition team that adhering to the deal is good for American businesses. Photo. Refugees and migrants waited to be registered last month near the camp known as the Jungle, in Calais, northern France. Mr. Trump has said he wants to bar entry to refugees from certain countries, a proposal that has been denounced by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Credit Mauricio Lima for the New York Times. Refugees and migrants. Mr. Trump has said he wants to bar entry to refugees from certain countries, and his campaign has defended a widely pilloried Twitter message by his son, Donald Trump Jr., comparing Syrian refugees to poisoned Skittles. Barring refugees based on where they come from would be in blatant violation of international law, which requires countries to offer protection to all those fleeing war and persecution. Mr. Trump's proposal has already been denounced by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Ra'ad al-Hussein, who said during the campaign that Mr. Trump would be dangerous from an international point of view. The incoming United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, was even more pointed. He said that any proposal to restrict Muslim refugees would only help jihadist organizations spread their propaganda and recruit followers. It's just telling them, you are right. We are against you. He is to take office less than 3 weeks before Mr. Trump. Photo. Secretary of State John Kerry and Mohammad Javad Zarif, Iran's foreign minister, in Lausanne, Switzerland, last year after achieving a major step toward a deal to limit Iran's nuclear program. Mr. Trump has repeatedly threatened to scrap the agreement. Credit pool photo by Brendan Smialowski. Iran nuclear agreement. Mr. Trump has repeatedly threatened to scrap the agreement reached last year between Iran and 6 world powers, including the United States, that severely limited Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. Mr. Ban has expressed the opposite view, calling the agreement a triumph of diplomacy that reduced the threat of war. He has urged all participants to respect its provisions. The agreement was also endorsed by the Security Council in a unanimous resolution. Almost immediately after the agreement was announced in July 2015, Mr. Trump expressed his hostility in a Twitter post. Follow Donald J. Trump at @RealDonaldTrump. The Iran deal poses a direct national security threat. It must be stopped in Congress. Stand up Republicans. 3:57 p.m., the 16th of July 2015. 1075 retweets, 1727 likes. At that same March meeting of the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, a lobbying group, Mr. Trump asserted that my #1 priority is to dismantle the disastrous deal with Iran, arguing that the Iranians had outsmarted the United States in winning concessions and could still develop a nuclear weapon when the pact's restrictions expire in 15 years. Despite Mr. Trump's assertions, it remains unclear whether he will seek to annul or amend the nuclear agreement. The other countries involved, Britain, China, France, Germany, Iran and Russia, have all expressed their intention to honor it. Senator Bob Corker, a Tennessee Republican who is under consideration for a cabinet post in the new administration, said Mr. Trump would probably be cautious about any change of policy. "I don't think he will tear it up, and I don't think that's the way to start," Mr. Corker said on CNN. Human rights. Mr. Trump has vowed to restore waterboarding as a counter-terrorism tool, saying torture works. That would contravene an international convention on torture. Chris Kobach, a member of Mr. Trump's transition team, has suggested that the new administration could create a national registry for immigrants from countries where terrorist groups are active. That would go against an international convention on non-discrimination, which took effect nearly 50 years ago. Western powers have sought to use the United Nations to highlight rights abuses they attribute to President Bashar al-Assad of Syria. Mr. Trump has made clear that whatever war crimes Mr. Assad may have carried out, Mr. Trump's first priority is the Islamic State. "I don't like Assad at all, but Assad is killing ISIS," he said in October. "Russia is killing ISIS. And Iran is killing ISIS." Arms Trade Treaty. Mr. Trump has not specified his view on the Arms Trade Treaty, which was overwhelmingly adopted in 2013 by the General Assembly and entered into legal force nearly 2 years ago. But gun rights advocates in the United States led by the National Rifle Association, one of Mr. Trump's most